Sonny, one thing that I've been really itching to ask you about is how there's been just this huge culture shift and change in the way we do career as a people, right? And so in America, it used to be you start your job, you try to stay at that one job for 30, 40, 50 years, and you retire there, and you that was just the kind of how it went. And now we're seeing this shift that I learned about in college, and you probably are learning about, is that we're doing this portfolio thing. We're doing we're kind of job hopping. We're kind of trying this, we're trying that. And so I know that you are a person in our lives that wears so many hats. You have a couple different ventures going. You're always on the move. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that and how that looks to keep that Jesus-centered and how you don't exhaust yourself doing A, B, C, all these things.
It's a great question. And I would say that I didn't do all these things and wear all these hats when I was 20, when I was 25, when I was 30. I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't, because I think if you don't hone your skill early, you just kind of try everything, you don't get good at anything. A store that sells everything, I won't name the store, but a store that sells everything from bread to bikes to guns to, eyeglasses, probably nothing is like perfection, but everything is decent. And I think that about our life, that had I not honed my skill in one specific area, which luckily for me was a big focus on God and ministry, then I wouldn't have been able to later do a lot of things. So now I do have my hands on a lot of things, but I believe it's important to be faithful in the little, and sometimes that looks like one thing. Sometimes that looks at only two things, but you get really great at it. And so you're working in maybe a career that you go, could I be here my whole life? Maybe. But because I'm here right now, I'm going to throw everything into it, and I'm going to show not just my boss, not just my peers, but myself, that I can commit and I can exceed expectations. Even when maybe the box I'm working in has a box, I can somehow blow a lid off the box. And if we'll do that, if we'll go the extra mile, then I believe later God opens doors in places you never imagined. But what's happened, and you talked about it now, the diversifying my portfolio, people aren't really talking investment and IRA. They're talking diversing their portfolio in what they do and what their background is. And if I meet somebody who's 24 years old and they're like, well, I've worked here, 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 and here, and I do this, I'd go, you haven't even had enough years in your life to do any of those great. So that doesn't really impress me. That sounds like a job hopper. Right? Yeah. I felt a little like a job hopper early on, and I really was pretty focused. And now I go, I don't think when you get to a certain age that it feels like job hopping at all when you do a lot. Because now I've got people that work for me that I can delegate to, that I can, leaders who are great leaders under me who can take things completely. So I don't have to think about the exchange every second of the day anymore, because you guys make it happen. And then you do more than I ever thought of for the exchange. And then I can go and do this, and that doesn't suffer. And if I feel like it is, I might pop back in for whatever need. But now I can do a lot. I shouldn't try to do a lot too early.
So by investing in your people, in your circle of influence, investing in them, you're able to do more now than you could have when you were, say, in your 20s. Because that job hopping really has that negative connotation where if you're an employer, you're looking at that and you're like, oh, this person has only spent 6 months at each thing or whatever. That has kind of a negative sort of
connotation. And also I think that people want to say they do everything but then delegate nothing. And I'm looking for people who can delegate like a boss. Like if I find a leader who can delegate, I can see they will not have a lid, and that means my part of that won't have a lid. I don't look at people who do everything and think, wow, I go, why aren't they delegating that? But there's some of us, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's only women, but I know as a woman, I meet a lot of women who it's like, oh, I just have to run everything, and I do everything, and I'm the one that runs the household too. And it's like, oh, that sounds like a badge of honor that your husband doesn't do it, you do it. And I go, then I'd be like, let's have a conversation. Like, Sean does all our laundry. I've delegated the laundry to him. And Isaiah does all the garbage. And Aubrey does all the dishes. So what that means is those big chores, sometimes I don't do those at all. And I don't do those in a 2-week period where I go, I gotta get home and all Saturday I gotta sit and do laundry. That's something, but then where's mine? I didn't just give it all away. Mine's the rest of the house. Just the rest of the house isn't as big of a deal. So I think it's not okay to say, I do everything and wear it as a badge of honor.
Yeah. I love it that you're talking about delegation, because I think that's something that we find so important at the exchange. And Absolutely. We're always talking about do the things that only you can do. Yes. And I know that stems from our culture and our leadership systems that we have in place. And so delegation is so important. And when you as a leader can learn to delegate, like you said, there is no lid. You lift your lid of capacity, and that's something that I think we're learning every day at the exchange. Absolutely. And we can apply that elsewhere as well. So that's been really great.
Being able to delegate has helped me in so many ways in my positions, not only at the exchange, but as a nursing student and in all these different areas. What I'm struggling with, though, is finding a way to not overstimulate myself and kind of like slow down, back up just a little bit, but still find the opportunities to succeed in. So how can people my generation, because that's something really huge for our generation, is we're in so many different areas and we're overstimulated and we're exhausted, and then we're like, oh, but we have to do one more opportunity. How can we slow down but yet still succeed in those goals that we want to meet?
The Bible says, let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And so I think if you are always saying yes, it sort of cheapens and lessens your yes. Because you are giving yourself to so many different areas that you cannot be 100% in 100 different areas, right? So it's like multitasking. I've heard studies done about multitasking, and it's actually not a thing, because when you are doing so many things at once, you're not giving 100% to any of those things.
Right.
And I think that's something that we as young people and Jesus people have to realize, that we are to give our all. Like, we're supposed to do everything as unto the Lord.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we filter it through, we always go back to our 5. We filter it through our 5. So if I'm saying yes to everything, is it watering down any time for me and self-care? Is it ultimately watering down my time or depleting my time with Jesus? Have I just said yes to things that I'm going from 6 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, and I go, what can I give up or say no to or remove so that I can have at least 3 mornings or at least 3 long evenings for myself?
So then, as a leader, how do you recognize that in other people? How do you recognize they're overstimulated or stressed out, and how am I able to help those people? How do we take some of that load off without making a leader or someone that we look up to feel maybe just a little like they're not succeeding in that? And how can you make that a positive approach?
Well, I think that I have, in the past, I think there are times I have thought too much for my people. And I've not just asked. So I've thought, I don't want to overload Abby, or I don't want to overload so-and-so. So I never delegate because I think I'm overloading. Not knowing they're completely fine and actually a little like, I feel like I'm ready for more and I have this stirring, but I'm thinking on their behalf. At the same time, there's people that have always taken the load and always taken more and more and more. So I give more and more. And I think that they're fine. And I've misread both. So I think when you get little warning signs, like you have somebody like, hi guys, sorry I'm late, I was up so late last night. Like, take that and file that in your brain and go, this is a person I probably should talk to them, and go, hey, talk to me about your schedule. Like, how are you doing? Because then when they just let it out because they've been given permission, or this could even be to someone who leads you. Like, I know you're my boss, or I know you're my manager, but like, how are you? Like your schedule. Because then you might be the one with the stirring going, I want more. And you say, can I take that off your plate? Same thing with people who you lead. If you have the conversation, you actually see where they're at, and then you can pull off or add to. I have too often just assumed I knew, and that I knew what they were going through or what their load was, rather than just asking the question.
Sure.
Because then I think you have people that you're leading that just quit, and 2 months earlier you could have saw where they're at, remove some of the load, and you'd have them on your team still, but they quit everything. Like that's when it's really gotten bad, when people just turn in their resignation for any volunteer team, anything in life, they just quit everything. That's not a good place we want to take them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes as leaders, we can have a tendency to assume capabilities as well.
Yes.
And I think that keeps us from delegation, or pushes us to delegate things that maybe people can't handle. And I know we've been talking a lot about at the exchange about how when people do feel that stress or tension consistently, they are not going to want to be a part of that.
Right.
And so,
you know, the other thing I misread besides where people are at and what they're thinking and their load, Sean and I were talking last night about this. We always assume people have a higher capacity than they have. We always see more in people than sometimes they see in themselves, or sometimes they even have. Like, I think all of us have a lid, and sometimes that, most of the time, that has to do with where are we in our Jesus journey? Because if we're not growing, everything's falling apart. So, but Sean and I see, and this is our fault even, we see so much in everyone we meet. We see so much potential, but I think it's because we both have been at the bottom of the dirt pile multiple times in our life, and then saw God do stuff through us. So we go, no matter where somebody is, like, God's going to do so much. There's such capacity. Here's the problem. I have seen so much capacity in people, but not realized the internal health of them isn't there. And so I'm pushing and asking and giving more because I know what they can do. And they literally don't know, or they have no ability. They can't change right now. Like, no change can happen, because change to them makes them want to like go crawl in bed. They're paralyzed with fear. And that's not a them issue. That's not a forever capacity issue. That's where they are right now. They cannot do more. They can't see more for their life. And so it's another thing, the capacity that you have to look for in your people, but then maybe have the conversation, because what we want to do is just go, oh, they'll see it soon. I'm just going to keep pushing and loving them. And they don't know how to lift their lid.
How do you speak into somebody that they have capabilities that they don't know that they have?
Like empowering them. Really.
How do you empower somebody?
I feel like if we modeled everything more, then that's what people would want to follow. And I think that's what Jesus did, and that's why he said, let me just spend a lot of time with these disciples, because if I spend enough time, they'll start to model me, and then when I go, people will model them. And Paul said, do as I say, you know, act as I act. He didn't even say, look at Jesus. Jesus is dead, gone, risen, gone. And he's like, do as I do, say, you know, talk as I talk. And that can kind of sound cocky. It's Paul, you know, Paul isn't cocky. Well, he was confident. And he went, I have learned, and he didn't even walk with Jesus. You know, he was the one persecuting Christians and saying Jesus was a no-no. But that moment where he realized that Jesus was real and he was the real Messiah, he just threw himself into, I'm going to do everything I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to model it. So I think that's how. I don't think that we need to do as many long conversations and long lectures. I think we need to go, you know, I have this joy, and we don't even have to say it. They're just like, how do you do it? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't do it. Jesus is my self-help. Jesus is self-help. Self-help doesn't work for me. Jesus is everything, my priorities. And that's not me telling them they have to. It's me going, I have 5 priorities. And I know when I'm off, I'm really off. And it always comes back to my quiet time and listening to Jesus and correcting things in my life. Like, that's how they go, oh, well, then I'll just keep watching what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, Pastor Sonny, so Something that I know my group of friends in our generation struggles with is transitioning from maybe the career you started in college to the career you're going to end up with in school or after you graduate, or maybe you're halfway through school and you find your passion and it requires you to completely do a 180 and go in the other direction. And that is actually happening with me and a few friends that are in my friend group, and we're finding a struggle to not only make that transition and really throw passion into that new, because we miss our old career or our old classes, but also we're starting out with a whole new group of people, and the culture has changed, it's shifted, and trying to bring ourselves into that and finding places that we don't quite fit in. And so how do you make that change and still bring joy and still be excited? And you are excited because it is a new career and it's the one you want, but there are still changes that you have to work through. How does that work?
Well, I think to have permission and give yourself permission that you can change your mind. Like, a 6-year-old can change their mind. A 40-year-old can change your mind. Like, just have the freedom to go, I can change my mind and my route. Totally okay. I didn't know that I would be graduating college finishing with a degree I did. After college, somebody asked me, do you want to get your pastoral credentials? And I'm like, I can. So I did that, and then I ended up thinking I was going to work at a vet clinic, or I went and worked at a Christian school with as an English teacher, and that was not at all on my radar. But it was for money, and then what I was going to do with my life was still formulating. You know, I think there's this pressure that we get from 7 years old on. What do you want to be when you grow up? And some it's astronaut, policeman, all that. I think these days kids are so smart. They're like, I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to be a civil engineer. And so I'm doing Legos right now to get ready. You know what I mean? Like there's a plan for everything. So then by the time you get to your senior year of high school or into college, you go, I have to do this. This has been the plan. Like, I thought I was going to be an architect or an interior designer. So I took classes in high school to get ready for that, to then go to college. And then I got a volleyball scholarship at a place I could do architecture. Awesome. Was like, that's my path. Perfect. And then somebody was praying for me before a youth ministry thing, and I sobbed and knew God was calling me to do this, whatever this was, and this was like before college, with my life. Wow. What I ended up doing with my life took another 5 years before I ever got paid to do what God originally told me, and even then it was very part-time. It took me like 8 years to actually get paid for the thing God said you're gonna do. And so there was lots that I did, and that completely changed. But here's the thing, now I do interior design. Well, that's 20 years later, and I just gave up on it. I just thought, well, I'll just decorate my own house, or then I got to play with, the lobby in the church, and I got to do that. And now I'm getting paid to do interior design jobs for people, and I can turn them down if I want, because I might be too busy. But I can also take the ones that I really want, and it's like a side hobby. So I think that if we can look at somebody else's path like mine and go, okay, that didn't go like textbook.
Right.
But in the end, this is way better. I'm not like dependent on every interior design and architecture job, even though it's for a barn and I have no interest, or for a mechanic shop, but that's where the money is and I have to do it. No, I can wait until it's going to be this amazing business that I'm geeked out about and it's fun for me. So I think that there's a lot of pressure when you're in your 20s. A lot of pressure. Absolutely. And now that bleeds into early 30s. And you think that if I had it all together, I'd know point A to Z, and I'd know the year I was going to get married, how many kids I'd have. And it's just like, nobody's putting that pressure on you but yourself. Maybe parents, but usually it's just yourself. Right. And just let God because that ultimately has made my life the most fun, is just going, God, whatever. And I mean, there's been places we've lived and things we've done that I never knew I would live in Seattle, or I'd live in Memphis, Tennessee. I thought I'd live in Wyoming or South Dakota, where I'm from, the whole rest of my life. And I'm glad God just took the wheel.
I love that you talk about the pressure on young adults, because it can be crippling.
Yes.
I found when I was transitioning that, because I too just transitioned from a career in corporate finance to now a leadership role at the exchange, and I found this crippling pressure that I had to have it all figured out, and it's just a lie. It's just kind of a whisper of the enemy, I think, to keep us where we're at and keep us from taking ground.
Yeah. Well, and I think that not just in the church or the exchange or like the world we live in, but I think in all businesses, I don't think people are hiring for position as much anymore. Granted, you have to have a degree to be a nurse, or you have to have a degree to do some of the tech things, or engineering or things like that. But I think in any position that can possibly allow for this, people are hiring the people because of who the people are.
Absolutely.
And the personality, the attitude, the just the character, and then they figure out how that person can accomplish the job. Like, you weren't a chef, you weren't a barista, and now you're focused on in the eatery part.
I do.
But you were a person that we went, she's amazing as a leader, and we see so much capacity. So, like, I wasn't a chef by any means. Like, we're sitting in my kitchen and it doesn't get used. Like, it just doesn't get used. But like,
Clean.
Yeah, it's very clean. It's helpful for that reason. But Sean was the one, knowing full well, being a chef, being a cook isn't in my history. He's like, just do what God's been telling you to do. Waffles and crepes and greens, just do what you've wanted to do. So I wrote a menu. We executed a way, and we executed the plating.
Yeah.
And we've had people say, who's your chef?
Yeah.
And we don't have one. But what that is hiring the right people that then took what I started and made the plating better, made the recipe better, just expanded things. That's about hiring people. So I think that sometimes the pressure of, oh, this wasn't my path, and are people going to judge that I'm all over the place? Or are you going, I'm just going to do what I do really well, and because people will see my teachability, that I'm willing to step into another realm if God says, that will actually open the doors more than another degree in the same area, the right resume. Most of our hires, we didn't need a resume to say you're a future leader and manager. We needed to talk to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think we underestimate the value of character, integrity, and teachability, and think that the degree, although I have a degree, I believe in degrees, totally. But me with a degree and a really poor character person, I wouldn't have gone anywhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I've even, like, me personally, I've been spoken to about saying, you don't need to feel the pressure to finish college. You don't need to graduate. You have skills to succeed in many places. And so I've turned that around, and I've been telling people in my circle, or people that I've seen in the exchange, or the people that we are being teachable with and receiving that, I tell them that I explain, and then you see those people and you learn how to empower them. And I've learned how to empower people from my leaders, from the people that I've surrounded myself with.
Well, and it's a great example. I mean, I think about just even staying on the exchange for a minute.
Sure.
We had teenagers that we put in lead roles that exceeded my verbiage and leadership on some training videos. And that particular person who broke the mold on can teenagers lead a whole shift, she's going off to college. Awesome. She may finish, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That girl, if she would have chosen to not go to college, she has a future in opening a branch for us, in leading an entire business for us. And we saw it at 17 and 18 years old.
Yeah.
That's all about people. God's hand is on some people, stronger. It just is. Like, I just meet people and go, I don't know what that is, but God's hand is on them.
Yeah.
And when those people rise to the top, no degree can outdo that. Again, I hope my kids get degrees. Sean and I both have degrees. We got in our MBA. But I look at our MBA, which we flunked out. No, I flunked out of stats, and I need to figure out how to get through an MBA by passing stats class. But I didn't do that to be able to put it after my name with initials. I did it because I just wanted to grow myself. And I finally, at my age, was willing to go, if I go back to school, this is for enrichment, not for a degree. Because God's opened doors that my degree didn't open up. I worked for IKEA as a marketing director. I didn't take one marketing class. But I knew a person who said, Sonny's done this, just even with a nonprofit. And I got the job over people who were within IKEA, other marketing areas across the world. And I got it because it wasn't just a who you know, it's who has seen the character, the teachability, the integrity.
Good. Yeah. So in talking about career shifts, there are times where, you know, like Kira, you are going from a life church exchange culture where we are so intentional about our culture and it being 100% kindness, 0% drama. You are going into a secular environment. So that is going to be a major culture shift, and I know that's something that we've talked about. So Sonny, how and I know that this has happened to you probably, where you've, like you mentioned just now, IKEA, that's a secular environment, that's a corporate structure. How do you bring that culture, or how do you not let that culture change you?
Well, I can tell you at the time, I mean, we were in a bullpen, the execs, you know, there were 6 or 8 executives that the culture was we all sit together with all the sales associates. Everybody wears a yellow polo and jeans. Like, nobody looks like hierarchy. The store manager sat across from me, and, you know, nobody is special. I don't know if that's changed, but I just remember clocking in and clocking out was like the best. Clocking out was the best time. Lunch, I was like, I just want to go somewhere safe. Now, I think because I had been part of even a more churchy culture where you just feel like everybody thinks like I think, I'm more ready to be around people in our life church culture. But I will say, you start to find it's almost like you just can't wait to get home and like get in a bathrobe and slippers and go, oh, I feel like warm and fuzzy again. So I think if you can expect, that's normal. And just know your safe place is your quiet time with your Jesus people, with your family, and with Jesus. Then honestly, I feel like I grew in my personal relationship with Jesus more working at IKEA than I grew personally working at that church before then, because I needed him. Like, I needed him to hold my hand, because it was scary to have 2 sales associates like F-bombing each other, and I walk up, I'm like, do I walk away? Do I address it? Am I supposed to do something? And I just froze. I think I've probably lived enough life now that it wouldn't be as scary. It was really scary for me. That was 10-ish years ago. But I think if I would have known to expect it, and then I would have known, you know what, this is going to give me an opportunity to get closer to Jesus. And then what people did see in me is they noticed I didn't go to the parties. They'd be like, hey, you want to go and meet? And I wouldn't go to the bar, but I also wouldn't go, no, I don't do that. I'd never say, I'm a pastor's wife. Do you know that? Like, I'd never do any of that. And I think they did. They definitely. I have some of them who follow me on Facebook now. And I'm like, wow, I only worked there a year. And I'm like, wow, they're following me. I didn't even know they would remember my name, but somehow there must have been some kind of a curiosity or an impact made. By I just had a peace, and I just had a joy that was pretty obvious.
That's amazing. And I think, you know, you as a Jesus person, I think it's kind of in our job description to take that wherever we go. And so moving into that secular environment is probably really scary for a lot of people who are coming from their little Jesus bubble. And so I think what you said about taking that with you and just letting it be evident
Yeah.
is so critical.
We don't have to be Bible thumpers, because that can, if we felt like we had to go and get everybody saved, not only would it be a big change, it would be overwhelming. You don't have to Bible thump. You don't have to have, we talk every week in our growth track. How do we share Jesus? We listen first, we talk last. So if we listen, which you're going into a place where you just keep asking questions about people, one, they're going to be your best friend quick, because they are like, you listen to me, you're my friend. And they're eventually going to say, Carrol, what's your story? Well, what I do with my off time, or well, about me, and we can't tell our story without telling Jesus' story. It's just who we are.
So true.
So I didn't have to take out my Bible and read them 3 scriptures the first time.
Right.
And I think that that's what we were always supposed to do. It wasn't supposed to be this bubble of our church people and then the world. I love that I'm around people all the time now that I don't know what their faith is, but I'm just going to remain who I am, and you'll remain who you are. And eventually they ask. They're like, hey, tell me about Bright. I'm like, how did they, or tell me about Life Church, or I read the Life and Culture magazine. And a lot of times they'll end up asking first. And then you go from going, this was really stressful, to go to a secular environment, to you are out there walking in going, God, what are you going to do today? Like, this is fun. And what better life than to walk into every day going, God's going to use me on the scene of somebody's life. And I don't even know what that is yet.
That's so cool.
No, that's helpful. I mean, even just for my group of friends, the people that I surround myself with, those are questions that we are constantly circulating and not quite getting an answer, but also kind of like, well, maybe it's this, maybe we can do this. I do know that from personal experience, the moment I walk through the exchange doors, I'm like, okay, I love it here. I love clocking into work. I hate clocking out.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. And I would love to bring that to all of the areas that I work for. I love for everybody to be able to do that, to walk out and not have your bubble, to be able to just interact with everybody and have everybody see that joy that you are a Jesus person.
Well, and I think we can use little slogans that they're much bigger than a slogan. You brought it up, 100% kindness, 0% drama. Well, as you're talking to people at work and school and they're talking about something and then they come up for a breath, it's, gosh, that's rough. Like, it's hard. I really go after 100% kindness, 0% drama. And sometimes that means I have to make peace and have the hard conversations, because it's more than peacekeeping in life. It's peacemaking, but it's worth the fight. Those are 2 slogans I just threw out there, and you didn't judge them. You just are like, oh, I get it. Like, and I have to fight for 0 drama. Then they're like, okay, that's stuck with me. Yeah, I want 0% drama in my life.
Right.
And then they might come back and ask, how do you get to that? How do you get there? So I think even some of the things that we say, like being teachable, you know, when somebody comes up and says, well, they said, and I said, and then you go, yeah, a lot of times I have to eat the meat and spit out the bones, because I know it's not all true, but what's true. And I just want to be teachable enough to hear what's true in it. That will diffuse somebody who's always going to have a fight with somebody to go, oh, I don't really want to think about what I did in that situation. And it actually softens them. But some people have never been parented in a life-giving way, and they've never been to church in a life-giving way. And nothing we do in our cultures, Life Church, the Exchange, any of our cultures, none of it is that condemning Christianity, hellfire and brimstone. It's just walking out life the way Jesus said to. And so I don't think it's bad to have little cliches and slogans that come out of your mouth, because then, like you said, you walk in the exchange, it's like it's already here. Well, you're just taking it in a little at a time. You're dripping it into the other cultures. Yeah.